All right, it's noon. Welcome. I'm Kate Daniels, Vice President of the Democratic Women of Monterey County. Thank you all for joining us. And I really am looking forward to this presentation that we have today. I think it's going to be a great luncheon, a great meeting. And I'm really happy that you're all here with us today. I'm going to make a few announcements, and then you'll be able to finish your lunches or start your lunches. And at 12:30, I'll introduce our guest speaker, and we'll get the program started. First announcement that I have is that our lunch for next month, the topic is state and local perspectives on the state of California education, has been changed. And you'll notice that the card that's on your table has the change of date on it. It is now March 16th. And our guest speakers are State Assembly Member Tony Thurman, who's currently running for State Superintendent of Public Education. And we also have Deneen Gus joining us. She's the Deputy Superintendent of Monterey County Office of Education. And Deneen is running for to become the next Superintendent of Monterey County Schools. So that should be a great conversation. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. That'll be a great conversation. It's our luncheon next month, and please just note the date change. It's going to be on a Friday, and it is the 16th of March. I'm going to skip around here, actually. I want to bring your attention to our candidate endorsement process, which you all participated in the last election season. It's 2018. The elections are upon us, and we are launching our endorsement process. It has been posted to the website. So if you're a candidate or you know a candidate that is running for office who is going to be seeking the Democratic Women of Monterey County's endorsement, they need to visit our website, because for the June primary election, the deadline is fast approaching. It's March 8th. Candidates seeking our endorsement can learn the entire endorsement procedure there on the website, meet the deadline, and give us the time we need to send the ballot out to all our members so we can do what we need to do to vote and get those endorsements out there. They mean a lot. It's the most exciting part of, I think, what we do, and it's why I'm here. It's why I love this organization. Is our endorsement counts, it matters, and you all are part of that process. So encourage the the candidates seeking elected office that you know to visit the website and get involved. The other announcement that I have is about Member Planet. Member Planet is our new membership software, and we're going to be moving everything over to our new membership software. It's where you're going to now buy tickets for our luncheon. It's where you're going to get our newsletters, that we all have these on different platforms now. It's all going to be one platform. So even if your membership is current, you've received an email from us and you need to just go join Member Planet, because once we migrate everything over, you'll not know about our luncheons, you won't know about where to buy tickets unless you're part of our membership software. So it's called Member Planet, and I gave Alicia Gaines. Alicia, will you wave to everybody? She has a list of everybody who's successfully joined Member Planet as of today, and that does not mean that your membership is not current if you're not on this list, but it does mean that you haven't gone and clicked the buttons and joined the group. So it's called Member Planet. I'm here after the meeting. Alicia's here. We're happy to help you, but do follow. We can resend the invitation if you need that, etc. We do have several folks here today at our luncheon who are running for office. I don't believe we have any elected officials in the house today. Any electeds here today? No, but we do have candidates who perhaps are going to be seeking the Democratic Women of Monterey County's endorsement. We have Tyler Williamson, who's running for Monterey City Council. We have Karen Locke, who's running for Pacific Grove City Council. And we have Janine Paccioni, who is running for District Attorney, Monterey County. Welcome, all of you. Before I turn this microphone over to somebody else, I think that's all I have. Jane Sullivan would like to make a quick announcement about the breast cancer bowl-a-thon coming up.
Thank you, Kate. I think you're used to seeing me up here every spring. I'm the president of the Breast Cancer Assistance Group of Monterey County. And we raise money for women and men, by the way, that do come down with breast cancer. And we are having a bowl-a-thon on March 24th. It's our 16th annual bowl-a-thon. It will be held at the Monterey Lanes. And I'm really excited to announce that most of the lanes have been reserved. Now there are 24 lanes. That's in advance of what it usually is. But we have a silent auction. It's fabulous, and there are spots on different teams that haven't been put up. So if anybody would like to have more information, come see me after the meeting, and I'd be happy to fill you in. Maybe you'll come out and participate or partake of the silent auction. It was fabulous. Restaurant donations, wines, and all different kind of things. But it's on March 24th. That's a Saturday. Monterey Lanes from 1 to 4. Thank you.
I have a couple more announcements I did forget. So moving everybody over to Member Planet, we are behind the ball in introducing our new members. And so what we decided at our last board meeting, so we make sure that we get the opportunity to welcome all new members, is since we've not been able to do it for the last several months, anybody who's joined our club in the last 6 months, or maybe who joined our club for the first time and has never been recognized, if you could just stand up so we can meet you and know who you are. If you could introduce yourself.
I'm Carla Seckham, and I'm a former member that I'm rejoining.
Oh, wonderful. Welcome, Carla. Thank you.
Again, I'm Tyler Williamson, and I'm the resident of Monterey.
Thank you. Welcome, Tyler.
Lisa Granger, and I'm a member of Monterey County too, and I've been a member for a year now.
Wonderful. Welcome, Lisa.
Denise Flowers-Sani, I just joined last week.
Yay! Welcome.
Karen Long, I've been a member about a year and a half.
Member for a year and a half. Welcome.
Marky Martin, I joined in October.
Thank you. Welcome. All right. Welcome to all our new members. We'll get it together and start introducing you at the next meeting after you've joined again. And one more introduction that I want to make, and then I'll let you eat your meal in peace, is we do have another guest from Alameda County and from the DA's office, and that's Andre Rochelle, and he is here with our special guest.
Hello, everybody.
All right, everyone. Hope you enjoyed your lunch. We're going to get started with our guest speaker portion of the program. Today's guest speaker is District Attorney Nancy O'Malley from Alameda County. She is the first woman to serve as the elected Chief Law Enforcement Officer in Alameda County. And I know I speak for at least the other members of the board of the Democratic Women of Monterey County when I say that gender just might play a role in the innovation and the vision and the leadership that she has brought to this position. We're only going to hear about one of her many achievements, but it's the one that is the topic of this luncheon, which is human trafficking. And DA O'Malley launched the Heat Watch program, which I think we'll hear more about today. And it's now used throughout the country in the fight against human trafficking. Her awards are too many to list here, but I will mention the most recent award, which is she is the recipient of the 2018 Modern Day Abolitionist Award from the San Francisco Collaborative Against Human Trafficking. Please help me welcome District Attorney from Alameda County, Nancy O'Malley.
Well, thank you for having me, and most importantly, thank you for being here to hear about the topic, to discuss the topic, and to then really move forward as after this session or this lunch. I want to just acknowledge a couple of people here who are really champions in your community around this issue, and that's Janine Pancioni and also Deborah Pembroke, who Deborah runs the Rape Crisis Center. Janine just is the Assistant District Attorney. They just launched their human trafficking program here in Monterey County. So we're thrilled that that's happened, and we're really happy. I'm thankful the two of you are here to add to the conversation. So I'm going to talk today about human trafficking. I'm going to give a little bit of a background. And then what I'm really, after we talk a little bit about the background, what we know about human trafficking, what we've learned over the years, then I'm going to talk a little bit about things we can do as community members and particularly as for some professionals. It's, for me, I'll tell you a little background. When I was just a plain old prosecutor going to court, I wrote a grant, and that was in 1996. And my grant was really, it was for a pilot project to focus on sexual exploitation by adult men of teenage girls. It was at a time when teen pregnancy was off the charts, and really what we wanted to do was try to figure out what was going on, disrupt that, and then be able to make sure these kids were safe from being taken advantage of or from the predators who were exploiting them. What led me to that was, before that, was when I was in college, I became a rape crisis volunteer at one of the first rape crisis centers. And I was sharing at lunch that what my experience there has really what's guided me like a missile in my adult life to change the paradigm of how victims, particularly vulnerable victims and women and children, are treated in the justice system and in our society, hence Me Too. And so what I saw back then, and that was in the late 70s, was that the system was really designed to push victims away, to not empower them, not to treat them with dignity, not to lift up their voices, but to blame them, to shame them, and to make them just go away. And so it really, since the 70s, has been my mission in life to be able to change that paradigm. Between that experience and going to law school, I was diagnosed with cancer. So this is the other half of my why I do this story. And that is that I remember the doctor, I was fortunate to go to Stanford, and he said, we don't really know that much about this right now, so you may die. Okay, well, I'm all right. What do I do with that information? But I sat there and said, okay, well, if I die, I hope my life meant something than just more to something than just my family. But if I live, then it's going to mean something about making my community and the people with whom I deal better. And so this is really what has inspired me. And I know that for many of you, everybody has a story that brings you to the place where you are committed to serving and committing to working for your better community and lifting up the people. So once I got that grant, that little pilot grant, one of the first cases I had involved a 12-year-old girl who was being trafficked. We didn't know that, we didn't call it that, but she was 12. She lived with her mother and her two sisters. From all accounts, it was a nice, loving home, but she fell under the prey of a 39-year-old predator. And he would take her out every night and sell her on the streets of Oakland, sometimes 8 or 10 times a night. When the police finally rescued her away from the person that bought her, it was a 50-year-old man who was raping her in a motel room. So I prosecuted both the guy who was selling her and the man that bought her. They both went to prison for 25 years, I'll tell you. But that really started me on my quest. So we know a lot more about human trafficking, and we know a lot about the dynamics that could make someone vulnerable to trafficking, and that's what I'll talk about. The other thing that doesn't get as much play as the sex trafficking is labor trafficking. I'm going to touch on that a little bit because in the county, it's a big agricultural county. You know, there are restaurants everywhere, there's construction going on. These are all industries that we're now looking at, and from my office, we're working with to be able to make sure that that labor trafficking doesn't become the prevalence there. So just to start off, if I can. So we know that human trafficking is really modern day slavery. Part of my message is that, or I believe that messaging is everything. So when we call it now human trafficking, people know basically what we're talking about. But when we call it modern day slavery, people hear it differently. I don't use the term pimp because it's too easy and it lets people off the hook for what they're doing, which is being slave owners. They're buying and selling children and other people. So I always use that term, trafficker, slave owner. The other thing is that many years back, we declared that we do not call children who are engaged in commercial sex being trafficked. We don't call them prostitutes. This has been a huge monumental shift in people's attitudes about kids that they have seen, people they've seen who are in fact being trafficked. Because it's, for many, for some, I'm sure not in this room, but in some areas, if they say, well, she's just a prostitute, it makes it easier to make them invisible, to push them in the marginalized and push them in the shadows. When we start saying, no, these aren't prostitutes, these are children, there's a new awakening. And so I hope you all will join me in that mission of always calling it what it is, so we never get used to the term human trafficking and think everything's okay. In fact, every year we do billboard campaigns to bring awareness. This year our billboard campaign is human trafficking is real and it's here. Because people hear the term, and I don't want anyone to be complacent with that, oh yeah, that human trafficking thing. Okay, next, that kind of thing. So we know that they estimate between 100,000 and 300,000 children and women are trafficked every year in the United States. In my county alone, in Alameda County, which our largest city is Oakland, that we estimate that on an annual basis, we're seeing about 2,000 kids who are either being trafficked or are vulnerable to being trafficked. And we work very hard to get those vulnerable kids out, and we work equally as hard to separate, rescue away, whatever the term is, for those young people. And while I'll talk about girls, clearly boys are being trafficked too. They present differently in the system. They present more often as homeless youth rather than trafficked youth. And so we're really working hard to understand that dynamic and to educate our community. It's the fastest growing criminal enterprise, surpassing drugs by far. And I'll show you this one more, as I just said. San Diego did a remarkable study, which I'll talk about in just a second. But this is the FBI's hotspot list in California. So you can see the red spots are really hot spots. LA, San Diego, Alameda County, San Francisco Bay Area, sorry, trying to get out of the way. And that just brings awareness to people that they think it's not happening in their community, but really, when we look at the maps and we know what's going on, we know it is. In the San Diego study, they looked at 11,773 victims in 1 year. I mean, they did the study over 1 or 2 years. It was largely run by gangs. So imagine being trafficked, and then you realize you're being trafficked by gangs who, it just adds a layer of scary to the whole initiative, to the whole process. But they determined that $810 million a year is the industry's financial take on this. That's $810 million a year in San Diego County alone. So the other myth that people have is that they think human trafficking, that must be, like in my area, they'll say, that must be women being brought from Asia or being brought up from Mexico. And the truth is, these are, the kids I'm talking about are kids who were born and raised here with a lot of vulnerabilities. And this is one reason where part of my other quest is to really urge, push, whatever I have to do with our those that have authority to go check on families, like departments of social services. Go check on families when kids are young, not when they're already to the point where they're vulnerable to being trafficked. And let's make sure that we're intervening with families early. We do that through school attendance. We're in homes with our public health partners when kids stop coming to school when they're in first grade and second grade and third grade. So if there's something going on in that home that might ultimately make that child vulnerable to being trafficked, we want to get in there early and see what we can do to help stop that or to help change that paradigm. So what we see now is that we see young people being tattooed. This barcode thing, sometimes it's on the neck, sometimes it's on their wrist, as on her arm as it is there. It's quite disturbing what traffickers will do. And it just reinforces that if I ever thought I'd have a sympathy, I mean, I think traffickers have had their own childhood trauma that makes them do this, so I'm aware of that. But if I look at stuff like this, or I'm talking to some of these girls who have been branded on their face, or in their mouth, or on their arms like that, I don't have sympathy. So this is what we know. Average age is about 12 to 14. It's not unique to any population, urban, suburban, rural. One of the strongest spokesperson against human trafficking based on her own experience came from Grants Pass. And she was lured away by someone, Grants Pass, Oregon. She was lured away, ended up in Las Vegas, that's a big hotspot. People will say to me, well, if we just legalize prostitution, won't that handle this? I go, well, it's legal in Nevada, and guess what? Las Vegas is a hotspot for human trafficking. This is not about commercial sex, this is about exploitation. We do a lot of research to make sure that we understand what can make someone vulnerable. And here we know that kids some youth will have drug history. Oftentimes it's not their individual drug history, it's being given drugs to control them when they start to resist what's going on. Or they thought they were going to be in love with this man that was going to marry them, and next thing you know they're on the street or in a motel or on the internet, and that's not what they bought into. And if they try to leave, then the traffickers will use drugs. We also know that there's a very high incident of runaway. And I'll tell you that this is the saddest thing for me, because when we talk to kids, and they tell us what it was like in their home, that mom's boyfriend was molesting them, or mom was selling him for drugs, or they were in foster care and the foster parent was selling them, or the foster brother was selling them for drugs. Their childhood was taken from them, and these kids, many of them, are very, very vulnerable. And so for them, they often think that being on the street is safer than being in a house. Being on their own is safer than being in the house where they've been exploited or hurt. And what is stunning to me too is that you can see human trafficking doesn't require moving people, but in fact only about 65% of the youth that we deal with in Alameda County are from Alameda County. They're from Monterey, they're from LA, they're from all over the place, and they are moved, and it's a mobile group, and sometimes they're moved so that the trafficker can keep them off balance. Like, I don't know what community I'm in now, who can I call, who's going to believe me anyway? Here's some more examples of branding that we've seen, which is awful. And what's really just so awful about this is, like this young woman that has the guy's name branded inside her mouth, after a couple of weeks or a couple of months, when he's sick of her, or he doesn't have any use for her, or she's so spent that she can't perform anymore, she will be sold to another trafficker. And now she's got his name branded in her mouth, and who knows what the next person's going to do. Some more. So what we know is a couple of things. And one of them is that we have child abuse is rampant with those who have been trafficked. We have a lack of collaborative and comprehensive responses by the community, by our government agencies who haven't stepped up and done their job. And I say that, it sounds more critical than I mean it. It's an overwhelming job for many, but this is at the core of child abuse in America. And we need to make sure that those government agencies that have the authority to do something are trained and are actually taking action. And then it's, for me, critically important that government and non-government agencies work together. As I keep telling whichever group I'm talking to, whether it's social workers, child welfare workers, police, prosecutors, it's no one industry's problem to solve. This involves all of us, including our community. It is the most neglected form of child abuse. There's a lack of, as I just said, lack of comprehensive response, and really a lack of intervention or interaction between the government agencies. We're changing a lot of that. So a lot of what we've done in Alameda County, you're doing here in Monterey County through the leadership from the DA's office, from the rape crisis centers, and I frankly have tapped our rape crisis centers in California to be the ones that lead this. It's sexual assault after all, when children are being raped. Even if someone gave money to another person, it's still rape. And the other thing is that our sexual assault centers are really trained to deal with the most vulnerable populations who find themselves in the most vulnerable situations. And so we're really So thankful that Deborah's here. But what we do is we're helping communities build this comprehensive response so that we can really attack this issue and do what we can do to stop it in our own counties. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about labor, just to reference it, because I don't want to ignore labor trafficking. For right now, my office, we have a labor trafficking task force, 50 members who come. And these are law practices, they're law clinics, it's Centro Legal, it's, we are partnering with everybody so that we can all start talking about what's happening in the labor field. We also have, which I'll talk about in a second, we've created an Alameda County United Against Human Trafficking, which brings about 35 different provider agencies, and we have working groups. So we're really attacking this, and I know this is just a matter of time before Monterey does the same thing, because you're already there from a standpoint of commitment to address this issue. And I think that's the first part. But the places where we're looking is in the construction industry. We have, and oftentimes in the construction industry, it's the trades that are bringing these cases to us because they're seeing the owners of the construction companies that are exploiting their workers. The biggest case we had was a case against a woman who owned a construction agency called NBC Construction. She had a lot of government contracts. And it was the other legitimate contractors and the trades that came and said, how is she getting all these contracts? How can she do this for less money, so much? Then the trades went and saw the workers, construction work, all Asian, wearing flip-flops and like a soft sun hat rather than hard hat and hard shoes. And so that started us on our quest. And at the end of that, we had seized everything she owned. We sold her house, we sold the building, we took her company. We paid every worker the wages that they were entitled to. And we paid back the state of California for the money they had to pay because she wasn't paying for their workers' comp when they were getting injured. That's the authority that the district attorney's office has when we know about the cases to be able to intervene. And it doesn't necessarily mean take everything away, but sometimes it does. We also see in restaurants, we see in janitorial, we see in personal service like massage parlors. There's a big effort now to really go after sexual exploitation in massage parlors. And then also, of course, the agricultural industry. So what we did to try to guide ourselves and to make sure we know what we're doing is we created Heat Watch. Heat is human exploitation and trafficking. And the watch part is, well, the heat part was, we started the first unit of vertical prosecutors, and it was a 5-pronged blueprint that guided us. It started with make sure that our prosecutors know how to do their job. The second thing is work with the police to make sure they understand what they're seeing and how to do their job. Then we needed to make sure we had non-government advocacy that was strong, like a rape crisis center or other organizations that were strong to provide the services for someone who doesn't want to talk to the government. And the government shouldn't, again, be the only one that steps in. The fourth one is we had no laws about human trafficking in California. It only became the law in 2006. And when I had the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. to talk about this, everybody thought we were talking about international trafficking. And I remember sitting at the White House with the White House Council on Women and Girls, and I'm telling you this, it's not because I'm so special, I just have a big mouth, and I worked my way in. And my motto, if you see your shot, take it, and I saw a shot and I took it, and there I was sitting with the White House Council on Women and Girls. They had no idea what I was talking about with domestic trafficking. And now, of course, they really have figured it all out. So we had to change the laws. We had to get data, and all of this information we've done is what drives both policy change and provides resources, which are so vital to be able to really attack this problem. The last part of the watch part of Heat Watch is that I like to tell people that I took Neighborhood Watch and adapted it to human trafficking. So the watch part is just like if you have a Neighborhood Watch and you see your neighbor's house being broken into, you pick up the phone and call the police. That's Neighborhood Watch. Well, we're like that with human trafficking. If you see something, pick up the phone and call someone, and that's the watch part. But it also engages the community. So we've trained about 25,000 police officers. We're not done. And the law changed recently. So that it used to be that the default for law enforcement was to take the child, the minor, off the street and bring him to juvenile hall. Well, and for many, it was the only safe place for them to be. At least they could sleep somewhere at night, not thinking someone's going to pull them out of bed or put them on the street. But to them, that's what we thought, meaning the professionals. But to them, it was, now I've gone from hell to jail. And so we changed that law and said, we're not arresting these children. In my county, we created a law in 2008 that allowed Alameda County to divert them out of juvenile justice and put them into programs and things like that. And eventually, the rest of the state caught up through the change in the law. But clearly, the police now are the protectors and not the enforcers. The second part was prosecution. My office now has prosecuted for sex trafficking involving minors almost 575 cases. And we have 82% conviction. So I know Janine sits on the Human Trafficking Committee for the DA's Association with me, that we have colleagues around the state who say, we can't get convictions. I go, I beg to differ on that one, because we get convictions. People understand when they hear about what is happening to children and to other people who are being exploited. Again, I told you about policymakers, and this is just, we've done tremendous amount of work, tremendous amount of resources coming from Washington, D.C. That is still appears to be, knock on wood, it'll keep coming. We try to keep under the radar on that one. I didn't say that out loud. And then really helping our advocacy and our support agencies to grow. To looking at healthcare, to looking at human services, to looking at creating safe and stable housing. These are critical needs that people have. So again, if we separate someone away from the trafficker and we don't have somewhere for them to go, what do we expect? They're going to go where they can have a place to sleep, even if it means it's bad. People are going to go where they feel safe, or they can get food, or they can get shelter. We started, some of the initiatives we've had is we started a girls' court. It's really different when you have just girls in a court. They speak quite openly when it's just girls in the court. When the boys are sitting there too, whatever, anybody who's ever taught high school knows, when the boys and girls are in the room, it's not the same conversation. But when these girls are in court just with us, and they're in court for different things, but we're very clear at identifying kids who come in for some crimes, and then really source back to why did you do this, what's going on in your life, where do you live, and what they tell us is what we all suspect, which is they're being trafficked, or they're being hassled to be trafficked, or they're being pursued by a trafficker, and things like that. We also, one of the other areas that we have really put a lot of attention is our safety net program. Safety net is, we started this because nobody was ever talking about these kids. And when they were going into the juvenile justice system, when they left us, nobody ever kept up with them. So it seemed to me that we were really, it was very disingenuous of us to give them all this love and attention and support when they're in front of us, and then they leave and we go, oh well, next. Like that's what their whole life has been about. So safety net is really grounded in the principle that we're going to keep up with these kids. So we meet every single week since January of 2011. We've never missed a meeting. Started with 3 of us, now it's 23. But it's confidential because we want people to speak openly. Where's the child? Who's in touch with her or him? What are they doing? Are they back in school? Now we have schools referring kids to us. We have parents referring kids to us. We have system-based organizations and other organizations. Because then we as a collective group can say, who's going to be the point person to make sure Nancy's okay? Or Nancy stopped going to school, who's going to reach out and find out what's going on in Nancy's house that she's now not going to school anymore? So it really, and it feels like, oh my God, it's so overwhelming. We have seen about 1,000 kids, but it's not overwhelming when you do one at a time. And you have a big group of people who are equally committed to making sure that we're helping these kids move along. We also, it's now the law in California, I'm going to be mindful of my time. It's now the law in California that 5th grade and above have got to be trained on human trafficking. Now, there are different ways you communicate it to the 5th grader from the 9th grader, but it is now the law. And so there's an organization, a group that has put together training called Protect, that they're making available in certain schools. We're all working on different projects to make sure that our schools are being able to provide that training. And I'm not necessarily saying the teachers need it, but guess what? They need it too. One of the big issues I have right now is what are we going to do about housing for these kids, for these young people? So in my take your shot moment, I invited the bishop of the Oakland Diocese to my office and said, basically, where's the church in this? We're a church that feeds hungry people and houses the homeless, and where are we? And he listened there, and there was a priest from one of the Catholic schools who shared with the bishop that there was a 5th grader that was in one of their classes, and she started kind of missing class and little attitude, and they're trying to figure out what to do. None of them knew, nobody was trained. And then eventually she stopped coming to school. And then 3 days later they found her on the internet. She had been trafficked down to LA. And here this little 5th grader from Catholic school was on the internet looking like not a 5th grader anymore. And so that the bishop really resonated with him. So I'm proud to tell you that he got it and that he gave us a rectory. I said, you have real estate and you don't have that many nuns and you probably don't have that many priests, and your nuns are all living in apartments anyway, and they're great, they work really hard with us. So how about some real estate? And he did. So we have just converted a rectory, and it's opening in April. I share that because there are Catholic dioceses all over America. And if they're our partner, then anybody that has, for me, let's go for it. Like, who do we have to talk to? The faith community has a very important role in addressing this issue and providing some tremendous resources. Not, making children go to church or whatever, but to be able to provide the love and support that religion should be grounded in. So what we do every year is we have billboards. I told you we have billboard campaigns. This was our first one. And it says, buying a teen for sex is child abuse, turning a blind eye is neglect. So this is in-your-face advertising. In fact, we actually got an award, a national award for in-your-face advertising, which I'm proud of. But it really calls out, like, let's tell the truth about this. We don't have time to dance around the issue. We have kids whose lives are being destroyed. In one 18-month period in Alameda County, we had 5 girls be murdered that were being trafficked. One we haven't even solved yet. They just found her dead on the side of the road, having been shot in the head. So this is and we make these billboards available to anybody across the state or wherever. We don't really care. And some of our campaigns do go national because we try to just get really pithy, in your face. We don't have enough time to waste to tell the story. Just get it. And there was only one time when a mom called me, and she was upset, and she said she now had to talk to her daughter about child abuse and rape. I said, well, how old's your daughter? Oh, she's in the 4th grade. And where do you live? Oakland. We can help you talk to your daughter about stuff because we never know who's vulnerable and how vicious traffickers are, especially on the internet. The internet is such a dangerous place, so whenever I talk to people about this, I say, does your child have a computer, and where's it located in your house? Because in my house, I don't have kids, but if I did, I'm very clear that computer would be in the kitchen where everybody congregates, so I know what's going on, because you don't know what's happening, and so many of these traffickers are luring kids through the internet by claiming to be a 14-year-old or a 16-year-old, and then by the time they figure it out, they meet them, now they're being kidnapped, and now they're in San Diego. I don't use the term John either, because again, these are people that are buying children for sex. So I do call them child rapists. And also, I think John is just a name that lets them off the hook. And I always say, and I'm married to a guy named John, and half my family's named John. And so, we need to call it out what it is. So these are just some of the billboards. Last year it was about engaging men, reminding men that men can help stop human trafficking. This isn't a woman issue. There are men are buyers, but also men can talk to men about being men. And one of the things that we do, we have a website, a fake website. So if somebody's trolling the internet looking for children, they might hit on our website. In fact, 2,000 people a month hit on our website. A month. But what comes up, not an image, but what comes up is, you've reached the Alameda County District Attorney's Office and we now have your IP address. Now, we don't stop there because we have a group of men who volunteer. And those men will contact the men that are trolling the internet and try to build empathy and try to educate them about, do you understand that this is a child, or this is somebody's sister, or this could be your own daughter, and try to build some empathy. Remarkably, even after that message, you know, that this is the DA's office, not a site, some people go further into the website, like, well, okay, what's next? Yeah, jail, that's what's next. So we've done a lot to engage men. Now, I'm going to wind it down now because we do have a law in California that says there are 13 types of businesses. We've just added hotels and motels that are required by law to post a poster with certain information. It's too much information, but it's prescribed by the law. So this is ours, and this is around all over the state, but I'm proud to show you here, this is yours. This is yours that has been created by the DA's office, and it has all the right information. The visual of it draws your eye because of the top. It's very clear that we're talking about stopping human trafficking. Kudos to Janine and her team for doing this. The way it works is, the way we've done it is that most businesses are not doing that. I'm pretty sure if we went downstairs and looked around this hotel, we wouldn't find one. And so we created an app called MAP 1193. The bill that enacted it was Senate Bill 1193. So MAP 1193 is on your phone. So I have my phone. I pulled it up earlier for Janine. And I just put in MAP 1193, and it'll come up with the site that has all the licensed and permitted businesses that fall under the law in my phone. And if I'm in a restaurant and I don't see the poster prominently featured like the law says, I just call up the restaurant, I push a red button, and the message goes to the DA's office because we're authorized under the law to enforce the law. And we have days of action, which I know Monterey is going to have soon. We do it with volunteers. And what we do is we train them to go into the bars and the restaurants and the nail salons and the clinics and say, here's the law, you're required to put this up, and where would you like me to put it? No, I'm good, I don't need it. Well, okay, here's the deal. First time is first failure is $500. And it's $1,000 every day after that. So where would you like this poster? And if they don't, then we'll go take their money. And what we're doing with the money in my county is we'll put it into a trust fund to put back into services for those that are being trafficked. So we're talking to Janine and to the DA's office and already they're working with my staff to already build MAP 1193 with Monterey County information. And here's another thing that we've done with our high school kids. The kids in high school can be our greatest asset and our greatest allies. I mean, just look at what's going on in Florida with those kids from the high school who have just become the mobilizing force in Florida. Bless them all. So what we're doing is we're tapping into our kids. Oops. We're tapping into our kids. And this Red Sand project was started by an artist in New York who I met. And what it is just sand that the kids put in the cracks of the sidewalks downtown or by City Hall. And when people walk, I go, what's up with the red sand? Let me talk to you about marginalized people, i.e. trafficked individuals. And then the kids get to be the messengers to what people can look at to see if they were going to recognize somebody who's being trafficked or exploited. And then I'm just going to come back to the end. This HEAT Institute is a research-based institute that I started. This institute is really about what can we learn from what we know already so that we can build prevention into this whole dynamic. And we've had hearings all over the state of California. I have a commission. Monterey was there. One of the big issues they talked about was labor trafficking and also sex trafficking of kids, being young people and women, adult women being brought up and held in captivity and then sold on the internet or sold on the streets or sold in brothels. And so we know a lot about this now. And the areas that we are addressing now is there's no emergency room protocol for human trafficking. One of our doctors, who's one of my commissioners, said, I have a protocol for a dog bite, for a bee sting, but not human trafficking. So we are working with, we now have got a protocol in each of the hospitals in Alameda County, and we found the champion doctor. We provide the platform and the framework, and then it tailors to that hospital. Those doctors and nurses and mid-level practitioners become the trainers and the TA for the rest of the hospital. So we're training labor and delivery nurses. 1 week in Alameda County, there were 4 girls who all had, 4 teenagers who all had babies in the same week by the same trafficker. And nobody figured it out. So that's what drives us. We have got to get these institutional workers to be able to identify, and then what's the appropriate response and who can they call. The other part is housing, and I shared with you about our house, and I'm one of 9 kids. And my mother, we would come home from school some days, and there'd be some strange kid sitting at the kitchen table with us, like, who's that guy? Oh, he got kicked out, Danny's friend. Or who's that guy sleeping on the couch? Oh, he's going to be here for a couple days. He got in a fight with his mother. My mom never turned anybody away, even though she had a full house. And she never judged either. And so the housing that we have, the house that we're going to open up, my mom's name was Claire, is called Claire's House. So we love that. So if Monterey Diocese ever decides to do a house, we'll help them. And it can be named after some wonderful person who opened their home and never judged, and be able to provide that. But we're continuing with the work through the HEAT Institute to really make sure that we, not just from Alameda County, but across the state and with our partners across the country, we need to put our effort at prevention. And that's one reason why I think it's so important for our other government partners and people, school teachers and people that see kids when they're young, before the trauma is so layered that it's like peeling back not a layer of an onion, but like 25 onions to try to get to their source trauma. So I'm very appreciative of your attention to this, and thank you so much for having this be your topic today. Thank you. Thank you so much. We do have time for about 15, 20 minutes of questions, so we'll end it at 1:30. Since we only have one microphone and there's some cameras, would you mind just repeating in your own words the questions when they're asked to you? And we'll start right over here. Okay. You can just say it and she'll repeat it.
Hi, I'm Sarah Sanger. My sister's the deputy director of the...
I can see this is more than me.
There you go.
My sister's the deputy director of the Immigration Center for Women and Children. They have 4 offices throughout the state, one in Oakland, you probably know about it. And what they do is they get T visas and U visas. So T visas are for trafficking, U visas are for battered women, crime victims, and they get them for their clients. And they've been very, very successful. She works 13-hour days. And she's just insanely dedicated. And they work with law enforcement. So part of the criteria for at least the U visa is that the person cooperates with law enforcement to get their abuser convicted. So they do just really amazing, incredible work. And also, Jimmy Panetta, who's our local congressman, has a bill to lift the ceiling on T visas and U visas, because right now there's only 10,000 and there's a huge backlog. So he's completely trying to completely lift the ceiling. So it's a great program.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, I'll just add a little bit to it. The T and U visas, we certify that the person is cooperating. And there is a limit and it does take a long time, but as long as it's pending, they're here. And so we turn them around in 2 weeks because we want to make sure people are safe.
Oh, thank you. Josie.
Just pass the mic.
Really appreciative of everything you've done. When kids get into your system, what happens when they age out, when they turn 18?
Well, hopefully they're on their feet and ready to go. So a lot of our work is really the aftercare, healing, helping them to find their where they're going to be. We're working on some initiatives through both the Housing Claire's House and some others that for those kids that are ready, they can go right into college with scholarships. And the colleges in our area have already set aside positions for those that have gone through this. And they don't go in and saying, oh, hey, I'm the person, here's the spotlight, I got trafficked. They go in as students. And so, but the other thing is when there's a lot of resources, government resources for transition age kids, for we call them TAs. And so up until 22, they can still access resources. But the truth is many don't want to be system involved. They don't want anybody to be telling them what they can do, what they can't do. So we try to work with them around what's the advantage of being identified and what's a disadvantage. And then we just work with them. And we work with one of the young women I worked with. She was 16 when I first met her. Wow, she was a tough one. Very combative, like hated everybody. I understood why once I got to know her. But she was 3 years ago, was named one of Time Magazine's 25 most influential women because she was able to frame her story with all of us helping her, frame her experience, and then went to Congress to talk about foster care and what was happening in foster care and what was happening to too many kids. So we do a lot to help support them.
Questions? Yes.
Pass the mic to her.
Such a big hub for, because the hot spots are used to stop at the border. So I'm wondering if you have some insight.
Well, I think San Diego, again, is a destination place. That's where they have a lot of conferences, they have a lot of events there. And oftentimes, like we gave a lot of focus to this when the Super Bowl was in Santa Clara County. Monterey was part of that. We went that far, all the way from Sonoma, all the way down to Monterey County, anticipating that these big events bring in traffickers who are bringing people in. I think also there is a stronger migration of people from Mexico and Central America that are brought into San Diego area, San Diego proper, and then beyond, because they're right on the border, and so their whole county is on the border. And they also, it's a big county. It's the second or third largest county, and the gang activity is really what the research focused on. And they interviewed gang members who were traffickers in the jails, in the prisons from San Diego, and I think that's one reason. Oakland is a destination point. People come in through the airport, things like that.
Can you pass the microphone, please?
Not to make you feel bad at all, because this is the most amazing luncheon we've had in a long time, but we didn't get the same turnout because of the topic that I would have expected we would have gotten. We sometimes have twice as many people in the room. And the question I have for you is this topic somehow marginalized or thought of as like a woman's issue, or is there another reason? Because you just mentioned the Super Bowl, and I remember hearing a report about what happens at the Super Bowl. And to me, there is nothing more disgusting than a father bringing his young son and somehow going through this initiation with him where they then hire and buy women and girls to, it's disgusting and it's horrifying. But why? Is there something that's happening in society that this issue is somehow not registering or not as important, and does that have to do with gender?
What I think is that I think that people don't really appreciate the extent that boys are trafficked also. And I don't think people appreciate the extent of labor trafficking, because we all frequent the places where people are being trafficked. And so it's almost like a Pandora's box. And so that's one thing. The other thing is I think people now know the term. When we first started using human trafficking, people didn't know what we were talking about. And so now more people know the term, but I hope that, you all came because you're interested, and I've given you some of the gritty facts that maybe you didn't know, that's the kind of thing where people really understand why this is so critical and why it's so important, is that it isn't just a term. That's why our campaign, this is the 7th year we've done our billboard campaign, and we do this all year round, but my concern was that people know the term, and I don't want people to be complacent, because the term is those are just words. We still have people behind those words, and I think that's it, is people don't always appreciate, if it's not in your world, that they don't appreciate it. And I actually was in a group once, and a woman said to me, you know, I've read about you in the paper or something. You do something with kids or something like that. I said, well, yeah, you know, I have a very big anti-human trafficking campaign. And she goes, oh, human trafficking? Yeah, that's not really in my world. And I was going, oh my God, what do I do now? We're in a social setting. Do I, you know, get on my soapbox? So I said, listen, I'd love to have lunch with you someday or sit down with you for coffee and really tell you what I'm talking about, what's going on. I think, you know, I'd love to have that opportunity. Okay, so she goes off and I hear her friends say to her, did you just say you don't know what human trafficking is to her? And I'm just going, ears perking up. And these women hammered her. I said, are you kidding me? Do you not open your eyes when you drive down the streets of Oakland? Or do you not read what's on TV? Or watch what's on TV? How can you stand here and say, this is not in your world? This is our world. And I swear I almost started clapping for these women. I wanted to just give an immediate award. And so I think that that's part of the thing, is that it's like the stone that causes the ripple in the water. You all know, and now you'll tell people, and they'll tell people, and pretty soon we're all going to know that this has got to be a priority for us around how we deal with humanity, with our humanity, with other people.
Pass the mic.
So it's so wonderful to hear that the victims of human trafficking are no longer put under arrest. Is that standard when a victim is accosted, that they're not put under arrest, or they're just put in safety?
It is. So if somebody, so I referenced at the beginning about this pilot project that we did with teenage girls who are being sexually exploited by adult men. And we actually had some boys exploited by adult women also, as it turned out. But when we were changing the law to say that you cannot arrest a minor for commercial sex-related conduct, period, there was so much pushback from everybody. Oh my God, this is the end of the world. What are we going to do? And I said, you know, every one of you, to all my colleagues, and I said this in a friendly, supportive, kind way, that I said, every one of you took money to prosecute men who were sexually exploiting girls, and you never put one of those girls in jail. Why is it any different just because there's money involved? It shouldn't be any different. They're children. You protected them then. We need to protect them now. And now it is the law. And so I think that part of what we need to continue to do is to continue to train the police, because they want to do something and they don't know what their job is now. Like, well, what if she's 13 and she's on the street? What am I supposed to do? I can't arrest her. I don't have anywhere to take her. So we're working with counties to say, what is your plan? What's your action plan? One of the other things with the HEAT Institute is we've created a new law enforcement protocol, which is being distributed to all law enforcement across California. We had agencies from a lot of different organizations, officers from different agencies review it to make sure that we weren't doing something, or they weren't saying, and we're trying to tell them what to do, which we were, but we don't want them to think that. And so now we think that we're going to give them options of what they can do.
Heidi?
Yeah, I do work with similar programs in Nepal, and I just wondered, are you sharing any of this wonderful thinking and programs with other countries, like through the State Department?
We are. So we actually entertain a lot of visitors from other countries. But in November, I went to Israel to work with them, and I shared at lunchtime that the first people we met with were the police, and they're very, very interested, of course. The next one we met with was a person who was on the Supreme Court who was retiring, and he announced that he was a mergers and acquisition guy, and that they had handled their human trafficking so nice that we're visiting, but they took care of it, and we all went, okay, mergers and acquisition. So, you know, different countries are really struggling with this. There are some real challenges. I work now with an organization from England called Stop the Traffic, and it's no C, just a K. And they do online education through Facebook. And what they'll do is they'll identify a community, they'll do a lot of research about what's happening in that community, and then they, through Facebook, they're posting information. So the first American city they did was Stockton. And people that were on Facebook, all of a sudden something would pop up. Did you know in Stockton that 1 out of every 10 girls is being trafficked? What? And then that's how they're running it. They've done it in Africa. They've done it in the Middle East. They're doing it now in America. And so we're working with them to make sure that we expand out the communities where we can use Facebook and other social media to educate so that people get more sensitized to it.
I was just wondering, I noticed this phone number up here, and I'm wondering if this is the number to call, as you said, when you see something, say something, because I have noticed just last week, and that's why I'm here today, I saw a couple women at a truck stop, and I felt strongly from the way they looked and the fact they had no jackets on and it was cold and their clothes were tight and they looked vacant and lost. I felt something was wrong and I didn't know what to do. I was afraid to call the police that they might be arrested because they were not children. They looked like young, probably mid-20s, late 20s women. And is this the number that I should call? Was this what I should have had? Is this what I should have done?
It's a number that's answered 24/7. It's actually a call center that's in DC area. And they immediately call the area where the activity is going on. And the situation that you're talking about, and this is really one of the reasons why we spend a lot of time educating and training our law enforcement, because it goes back to what you just asked. And that is that when someone's being trafficked, they are considered a victim of crime. And even if, we don't know till we talk to them, of course, but that's the sensitivity that we're building into ask the questions. And how did you get here, and what's going on, and where are you from, and who brought you here, and there's a way to interview people or to ask questions that doesn't immediately look at them as suspects or criminals.
So should I have said something to her?
I wouldn't. I would, but I wouldn't suggest you. And here's the reason why. You really don't know who's behind the truck that they're standing in front of.
Yes, that's what
and you don't want to put yourself in a position of danger.
Well, I was afraid to put her in a position of danger. I'm okay, I'm an old woman. But she could have gotten beat up. They see her speaking to me, and they take her back and say, who are you talking to?
Right. That's why that number is a good number to call, because it's 24/7. Sometimes I get calls from people in LA. I got a call once from a guy at McDonald's. I'm looking at this next to me, and I think this guy's trafficking this girl. I'm like, okay, can you take a picture without being noticed? And if you can, snap a picture. See if they're in a car, snap the license plate number, and then give it to your police and let them follow up on it. And so they're little things, but we always remind people that we want our part of our heat watch to be safe yourselves, but also to be the eyes and ears, because law enforcement is not going to be there to see it. But this number and this text line is a 24-hour.
Hi. I was just wondering, at this point in time, do you feel that, like in the United States, that most of the police departments are trained at this point to really follow up and know what to do?
I think that the quick answer is no.
Yeah.
And officers change, they retire, new ones come in. Is it part of the training? But I think every state has a focus area. How that gets played out is different. Like, not every state says you can't arrest minors. And so part of it is getting the training in a place where they can get it online, they can watch it on videos, and then motivating the police departments to actually impose that kind of training. So it really is state by state. But I think that the more the community understands and speaks up, the more their police and their government agencies are going to respond.
So much. Let's give Nancy O'Malley a big round of applause. Thank you so much. I really do feel like this was one of the most informative luncheons we've had. I enjoyed it so much, and thank you all for coming. Before you leave, I have one announcement to make, and I also want to ask the DWMC board members who are here to just stand up so we can thank you all for everything that you do to make these luncheons happen. Thank you very much to the DWMC board. And as an organization that does fundraising, we give an honorarium to an organization, in this case of your choice. We've looked at the ones many you've founded and the things you've done, and we'll connect with you after. when we finish to find out where we should give the $250 honorarium. So thank you so much.
So I can tell you very quickly.
Yes.
I'd say give it to the Ray Crisis Center because they do such remarkable work.
We would be happy to. Thank you. Thank you for that. Wonderful. Okay, that's all, and we'll hopefully see you all on March 16th for our next luncheon. And thank you again, DA. Appreciate it.